has absolutely knocked the audiences out in the past, and this is really one of my favorite parts of the show. Please welcome to the stage the spoken word poet for the evening, Rick Christensen.
Good evening, and thank you. John, thanks for the great introduction. I did notice as soon as John said spoken word poetry, half of the eyes in the room, they glazed over. I saw people, flashing back to high school where they forced you to read and listen to poetry. And John did half the job here, but I'll do the second half. That's not what poetry is anymore. Poetry, ideally, is storytelling. And that's what I'm going to try to do tonight, is I'm going to try to tell you some interesting stories in an interesting way. And the first one I'm going to read, this got published a couple of years ago in Wink magazine. I'm going to do this one because it kind of fits our musical act tonight. It's a little jazzy, it's a little melancholy, and it's called Smoke, a love story. She was, of all things, quick. She would waver and slip from focus, object and spectator, blurred, speed concealing, reason diminishing, line and distance, close at once, then receding into relief. In her domicile, another cigarette to distract. I am not a distraction. Distraction can be captured by tar smoke and even breath. I loom into the consciousness, neither flat nor quick. I am not afraid of smoke. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of new ones tonight. I write about, like I said, I tell stories. I write about families. I write about grandparents. I write about all kinds of things. And this one is called One Shot at a Time. I noticed the cars are parked askew as I arrive, indication of a liquor run, not the first of the day. They buy their booze one shot at a time, tiny airline bottles lined up at the bodega. They say they are not alcoholics. They say, just one more. The 8-year-old has 80-year-old eyes. He is aging exponentially, one shot at a time. I teeter on the tightrope, balancing love against enablement. We play a sloppy game of Jenga, another shot to steady the hands. I see in the 8-year-old's eyes, those towers will fall. I imagine him emerging from the wreckage, brushing off the betrayal and disappointment, one shot at a time. Thanks. Well, I see some older folks here, so we've got some folks here who are at that point in life where you're starting to take care of your parents the way you used to take care of your kids. And sometimes that's hard if your parent didn't necessarily take care of you the way you wanted to be taken care of. You're trying to do the job now. And this is a poem about that. And it is called When She Was Old. And it's predicated on a poem by a wonderful poet named Madeline Artenberg called Soft Hand. So, When She Was Old. If I had seen how waxy her once supple and lustrous covering had become, seen her nails now broken, chipped and thorny as I helped to wash her hands, I would have been able to forgive those hands more concretely. If I had heard her raspy exhalations as she lay her friable bones back onto the pillow, and I had cupped her parched neck like a cradle while easing it back into the pillow more gently than she had ever cradled me, my breath would have come easier. If I had tucked her in tight under a comforter still warm from the dryer, I would have been able to look into those bird, bulge, mascara-stained eyes that never fade. Once she looked like an evil starlet, the one who steals away the good hero with a switch of her hips and the promise of more. If I had seen her pelvis clinging old and closer, to her thin flannel garment. I would have seen that once lost girl who had a child when she herself was still a child. She'd only practiced with dolls. They can take the punishment of frustration. The doll can be thrown aside in impatience, limbs left akimbo. I would not have left her in discomfort. I would do for her what she should have done for me, a resurrection found from care. I would keep the stinging soap from her eyes when I washed her hair. I would not bend the toes painfully when I put on her socks. I would not say hurry through gritted teeth, nor bend her fingers backwards with a glare of warning. Her soup would always be warm and not hot. Her nourishment would not burn going down. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read a couple from this book that came out recently. It's called Somewhere Between KC, Missouri and East St. Louis. It is a book put out by the Poet Laureate of Missouri, Mary Frances Wagner. It is 10 poems by 10 poets. I'm lucky enough to be one of them. I do have some of these with me tonight, and I will be selling them after the show. They're $15 a piece. There's 100 poems in here, so that's 15 cents a poem. So if you're interested, come see me. I'm sitting right back there after the show. Like I said, I'm a storyteller. Also, clearly I'm reading them. I wrote them, I can't remember them. Okay, this one is called an Ars Poetica. It's about writing poetry, and it's called Advice from My Muse. We mold happiness like a new clay pot, fashioned within the circle of our arms. Joy must be manufactured. We are survivors in this forest. Like a fern living amongst the tree roots, we make our peace with any soil. I tell you to be as grateful as the circumstances of your life deserve. I am the voice you have been given. It is important that you let me sing of these things. There is strength in acceptance. Sometimes you must swallow without question. Trust me to help you find your way. I know it is easier to just be clever, build a stackable life, reside in a universe of almost. But each morning when you are fresh and still in your robe, with your dog and your coffee beside you, let me help you write what we know. Thank you. Okay, this is a story about my dad. My father was past 80 when he finally began to tell us about the war. It was his first war, when he was only 20. He served during 3 conflicts, but it was that first war that marked him. It started when we found the box of his medals, and we told him that he was a hero. He became angry. He rejected the label with scorn. He told us that he knew heroic men, but that he was not one of them. He said, first you get scared, and you stay scared. You were frightened for so long and so relentlessly that you get angry, and you stay angry. And you are angry for so long and so relentlessly that you get stupid. You start to take risks. You do crazy things that you would never have imagined, and if those crazy things don't get you killed, well, then they give you medals. But it was all just because you were afraid, and you didn't want to be there, and you could not believe that you were there. How the hell did it happen? You were pissed at yourself, and the enemy, and your mission, and the cold, and the dirt, and the bullets, and the goddamn army. He said the good war movies got a lot of it right, at least the newer ones. But he said they couldn't get at his deepest memory of it all, the smell. He told us of the smell of his own skin, and of the men around him in the foxholes. Once they had a break, the major told them to put the torn and worn uniforms that they had been wearing for months into a pile, a gigantic pile of filthy fabric, and they doused it with kerosene to burn the stench and the lice. And they all got cold showers, and fresh uniforms were on the way. But the new uniforms never got there. Each man had to pick through a pile of kerosene-soaked garments, trying to find something close to the right size with correct rank and insignia. He said he spent 2 more months in another man's clothes, and that it took a week before the stink was his own again, even through the stench of kerosene. But they were grateful. At least the fuel killed the lice. He said the cold that winter was worse than the artillery. The shells came in waves. There were hills and valleys in the action, but the cold was constant. He said he got worried if it stopped hurting. That meant the cold was winning. So he would shake and stomp to bring back the pain that told you that you were still alive, and then he showed us his 3 belly buttons from the bullet wounds. But this time he wasn't being silly like every time before. This time he was in earnest. For the first time he was bearing witness. It wasn't a punchline anymore. He told us all of these things almost quietly, quickly, and with an embarrassment bordering on shame, but also some stubborn pride. He just wanted us to know that he was not a hero, you see. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do one more for you tonight. I love this venue. This venue is so rock and roll. And so jazz and so blues, but so rock and roll. And so I've read this here before. I'm going to finish with it tonight. This is a poem from the Alien Budapest Ghost Pop, the pop culture anthology that they put out last year. I'm lucky enough to have a piece in it. Bob Dylan turned 80 years old, well, one birthday ago now, and he won the Nobel Prize for Poetry. And so after those 2 things happened, I decided and did write Bob Dylan a poem. I don't know if he's heard it yet, but you guys will hear it tonight, and it is called Killing Bob Dylan. Men try to kill a thing before it can tell them the truth. Bob was having none of that. He hit Highway 61 hard. Everything about him was elusive, except for the words, and of course the music. And they almost got him on his Triumph Tiger. But he was made of boot leather and non-filter cigarettes at 3 a.m. and promises that no man should have to keep. So he licked his wounds and was back on the road in a year, because he knew that it is magnificent to love something that is broken. And he loves us all like a Jewish mother, doling out wisdom and criticism wrapped in newspaper and truth and some hope. He wrote about what he read in the papers, and when he saw a thing, he just said it. Sure, he went electric, but everybody was going deaf anyway, and he needed the volume. And he went country, because they would never look for him in Nashville with a loaded gun. To confect a life is hard, abandoning the shackles of structure without surrendering to chaos. Ask any warrior. Chaos breeds healing, born from resolve, and resolve is a paper sword. Bob's resolve was born from a dog's belly, ready to be expelled in a nauseous heave. Bob knew that the first sign of anything can be a stop sign or a crucifix. He burned down the fetid house without providing plans to build another, and he stole wisdom from the abyss of an asphalt parking lot. Bob saw that we have an awful lot of meat in the refrigerator, and he knew it would stain the furniture, and he knew that we needed a container. Bob saw that context has always been more important than punctuation, that life should be a poem and not a memo, because the form forces you into discretion. There is a sweetness to experiencing the end of things, and men must surprise even themselves with their secrets, trying to build a fire that will survive the rain. Bob knows a good person will only screw you if he has to. Thank you very much. Okay, that's my time, and now we're going to have some more good time. welcome back to the stage and ask all of you to join me in welcoming back JavierMendoza and Jim Peters. Thank you.